Hi guys, Harbs Narbs here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the history of Europe in the Cyberpunk universe, as it does in fact exist and feature quite prominently throughout the lore. I was inspired by this idea due to the fact that I am British and the news is filled with Brexit. However, I'll keep which way I voted between myself and our corporate overlords. I'll be using this sourcebook a lot, Eurosource, the Euro Theatre sourcebook for Cyberpunk 2020, written by Mark Galeotti. Before we start, I'd just like to thank my newest patron, Joseph. It means a lot and I appreciate it immensely. I'll be sure to keep up the good content. Okay, let's go. So, let's start off with a general overview of Europe in the fictional version of 2020. First off, it's called the European Community, and according to Dr. Gerhard Zettelkasten, the European Community is not a political bloc, it is an affirmation of cultural, economic and historical community. No other continent can boast such an association of equals. No other continent is as stable and dynamic. I think the conclusions are clear. The community is run by councillors, of which there are 427. The most powerful country is Germany, with 130.
Listen, don't mention the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it all right.
Whilst Turkey, which is a part of this community in the Cyberpunk universe, only has 12. It is customary for each councilman or woman to be sponsored by their own government and a corporation, with the apparent logic in this being that the differing interests from both actually cancel out each of their interests. Now, it should be noted that each country in the European community is still independent, but any notion of egalitarianism has been thrown out of the window. Your financial worth is all that matters when it comes to the European community. To demonstrate this, we can see that the City of London has its very own councillor due to the amount of revenue it generates. No, not Greater London, I'm talking about this tiny bit here, which in the Cyberpunk universe is a fictional powerhouse run by corporations. Wait, that bit sounded a little bit too familiar. So the system is designed to be deliberately favourable to the rich, as if you're a Turkish citizen, you're only going to be able to vote for 12 councillors, who therefore have less voting power in the community, and can't pass what they want to pass. Likewise, if you're a corporation in the Cyberpunk universe, you'll want to base your companies in countries that have more councillors, which can provide you with benefits, especially if you sponsor them. Those corporations then provide jobs and, depending on your point of view, certain benefits to the society in which they go to, all whilst disenfranchising the poor. The poor get poorer and the rich get richer. How could a country like Turkey get out of its situation when the lack of councillors means a lack of sponsorship from industry, and therefore they can't generate more money, which means they will never gain more council positions? It's almost like this corporate system was designed to be unfair. What bullshit. So let's talk about Britain.
Can you get me a rope? Get me a rope, okay?
Britain is described as follows. Its large-scale industries are in terminal decay, its democratic traditions crushed under martial law, and its voice in Euro-government circles ignored with growing regularity. A coup by the army in 2001 overthrew Charles III from the throne, and a military government was installed. In fact, Britain is largely in a state of anarchy. With a militaristic government and a failing economy, the country's councillors are basically ignored by the European community. However, out of the chaos and criminality of a post-coup Britain was born some of the best music and street culture. There was a far-flung difference between the chaotic gangs of Britain's streets and the highly militaristic and efficient government that ruled over them. Part of the reason why no corporate entity fancied a part of the UK, except from the City of London, was that 47% of the population had become nomads, and while significantly less violent than the street gangs in the city, this cottage industry culture had sapped the UK of much of its strength, almost like a reverse industrial revolution. The UK was not for the faint of heart, and the people there lived considerably harder lives than their counterparts on the mainland. So, what was life like for the average European in the European community during 2020? Well, the currency of Europe was something called Eurodollars, and this currency was controlled by the European Bank. Yes, there is a bit of a theme of naming everything in Europe with the word euro or some deviation, but why not go euro crazy? So the European Bank is actually described as being the hub of the financial world, and Eurodollars are the safest paper around. In fact, as a whole, the European economy was doing very well compared to the world at large, and even though the EDF, the European Defence Force, was its standing army, it was barely necessary as Europe produced mass drivers, which allowed the European Space Agency to colonise the moon, of which they control the only two cities on there, Tycho and Copernicus. And when you have the high ground, nobody wants to mess with you. Just ask the people of Colorado Springs in the United States, when in 2008, when the orbital war broke out between Europe and the USA, the ESA dropped a 2-ton lunar rock on the city, destroying it. I mean, who needs nuclear bombs when you have gigantic ass rocks? Every European has an ID card which acts as a driving license, passport, work permit, Eurobank credit card and medical record. This gives a lot of work to Europe's netrunners that number in their thousands, forging fake ID cards. Not having your ID card on your person when stopped can fetch a fine of up to €500 or imprisonment. If you're visiting the European community, then you would be given something called a provisional aliens card, and unless you were born to at least one European parent, becoming a citizen of the European community is difficult, either having to be sponsored by a corporation in a high-up job or by shelling out $500,000 to buy bonds in the European Bank. If you're an average citizen of Europe, life isn't too different from the average person in Night City in the US. It can be hard, but the majority of people live in relative safety, warmth and are well fed. A fashionable trend in Europe are disposable clothes. Apparently it's due to the fast fashion scene plaguing the continent. However, what are the best ways to make money in Europe? The first and likely the most exciting are the solos, who are basically bounty hunters, but they differ significantly from their US counterparts. In the US, solos are bred by the street, clawing their way up from the gutter, learning their tradecraft in a dirty, vicious slice of social evolution. In Europe, they learn it at school, selected usually after degree-level education. Euro solos are then trained, equipped and groomed for operations Europe style. Yes, Europe style. If there is one thing I know about Europe, it's that the Finnish are the exact same as the Spanish. Remember, if you don't have Euro at the start of the word, then Euro crazy. Euro solos usually take jobs as a security op in a domestic posting to get some basic experience, and then might move on to a corp cop in a North African facility for some blood and adrenaline. Being a bodyguard is common, and then real stuff like extractions and assassinations also exist. This is of course all done through the corporate world. There are of course the Euro solos that prefer to work for individual clients, illegally known as deniable ops. There is also a significant lack of bare-chested soldiers of fortune in Europe. Instead, the solos in Europe take their cue from the near-mythical elite Cyber Circle and the Angels, shrewd businessmen, educated aristocrats of combat, and honourable and cultivated artists of death. It is common in Europe to cover up your enhancements and to hide your metal arms with synthiflesh. There are a number of corporate mercenary armies available for hire in Europe, and there are also mercenary armies provided by the individual nations, the most efficient of which is the British Special Air Service. On the flip side of that, it is also the most expensive. The cheapest national mercenary company is Turkey's, where they really are getting a raw deal in this sourcebook. They are described as follows. Turkish troops may be poorly equipped, badly disciplined, scarcely trained and barely motivated, but they are cheap. Very cheap. Another popular way to make money in Europe is of course net running, which is conditioned by the Euronet. US netrunners are apparently surprised by the mediocrity of their European counterparts, and the security of the Euronet is largely down to quantity over quality. Interpol are very powerful in Europe and still dominate large aspects of society, which corporate types and netrunners struggle to get around. This makes lucrative work for foreigners, especially from the US. There are of course numerous ways to make money in Europe. Some of the main ones include the media, policing, which is still well funded in Europe and described as follows. If US cops believe in heaven, it's probably a bit like continental Europe. No inner city DMZs, streets with lights that work, citizens who believe in the law enough that they sometimes even call them, corporate cops who don't have an absolute license to kill. In fact, one of the distinguishing features of Europe compared to the US and the Far East is that Interpol, who are based in Europe, have managed to retain the majority of their control. The European community and the individual national governments have resisted for the most part the privatization of authority. However, this line has become increasingly blurred, and sometimes it is hard to see where the corp ends and the state begins. But for now, corporations are not able to do what they want and still have to abide by stricter state rules in comparison to the US, providing pensions and minimum standards for health and safety. Okay, that's the end of part 1 guys. If you enjoyed this video, then do please give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time for part 2, where we will talk about more obscure cyberpunk lore. Bye!